Oh, what day is that?
Saturday is the Saturday. Saturday is the Saturday. Yeah. Shouts to De La Soul.
Stoppin' Show, we're on the team at 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Back from Indianapolis, but plenty of football news still happening and plenty to watch for this weekend. We'll talk in just a few moments about Travis Hunter with our guest, Clint Yates. Why is Clint here? Because it's Friday, and that's what he does. Of course, the host of Clinton and Friends on ESPN Radio. You also watch him on TV, read his work, ESPN.com. But Mr. Yates, we're going to use your LA-ness to get us started, because the big story of the day in the NFL is you're going to be watching the same quarterback this year for one of the home teams out there. Matthew Stafford and the Rams restructure the deal. So first of all, how are you doing on this Friday?
I'm doing well. We've been talking about this Matthew Stafford situation quite a bit. And I will say, not that I am a Rams fan, but my station is, in fact, home of the Rams. This is a thank God circumstance. I mean, we were discussing this because there were multiple options here. Number one was what happened. Number two was he goes somewhere else. Number three, though, was the offers get matched and Stafford decides to walk anyway. That was my main concern, is that he was going to be like, you know what? Don't really appreciate how you've treated me. I'm the one guy that's won a Super Bowl while this team was in Los Angeles. It happened in Los Angeles, no doubt. And you got the nerve to act like I need to be shopping around, like people don't want my services. Yesterday's price is not today's price. There was an element of that I was concerned about. That is not the case. They got him back. This had to happen if you're the Rams. I don't know what they were thinking, even letting him out of the building to begin with.
Well, so the thing is with them that's really interesting is they're kind of simultaneously on two timelines, and they had control in this situation because he had years remaining. He doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money. It was a kind of expensive cap hit, but they could have, like, there was no way he could have just flat out walked based off of where the contract was. We were still waiting at the time that we're talking to see exactly what the restructure is. But he certainly could have been like, oh, you thought we had a deal? That number that I said last week? Not so much. So there was definitely an element of that. But they've kind of got these bizarre two timelines. They were the team that played the Eagles the toughest in the playoffs. So by that nature, they feel like they can win right now. But the problem is they also have a bunch of young dudes that's kind of like a future timeline. And they've got to make sure that they've got the flexibility to retain some of those dudes. Some of those extensions are coming sooner rather than later. And I just think that, like, they're in a good, tough spot because they're kind of stuck between two places. But at the end of the day in the NFL, Clinton, I think if you can win right now, you should try to win right now. And Matthew Stafford undoubtedly helps them win right now.
That's what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying. And I say this all the time, Craig. I can come to a different conclusion from the same data set as other people. And I do. That's not two timelines to me. That's one timeline. And the reason why it's one timeline is because the previous timeline you had that ended up with the Super Bowl champion, that guy's still there. That's why it's one timeline. And here's the other reason why this was remarkably dicey for me, for the Rams. If you're letting him walk, if you're saying, oh yeah, go shop around, you're indicating off the rip, we don't actually have a problem if you leave. There's that alone. Here's the issue with that philosophy. It is predicated on the idea that you can do it without him, that you can do it somewhere with someone else, that the system works otherwise. Guess what? You already tried that. That guy now plays in Detroit because you had to go get Stafford because it wasn't just the system. That's where the logic fails for me if you're the Rams. It really was Matthew Stafford to some degree. That's what I'm saying. That's why I was like, dog, you can't let this get too far down the road.
That was a younger version of Jared Goff, and they did make the Super Bowl. So, like, the margin of didn't work. Like, did it not work? They made the Super Bowl.
The margin is Stafford, is what I'm saying.
But, like, Stafford now or Stafford 4 years ago? And, like, here's the other thing. And, like, you know Jordan Rodriguez, phenomenal Rams writer for The Athletic. And I was listening to her talk about this situation earlier in the week on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays. And she had this unbelievable line. Jordan is like a literary genius. And so, like, this is smart. The way she describes things is so good. And she just goes, this is a hubris organization. And there is definitely a part of them that go, and Sean specifically. And Sean is a genius, but, like, sometimes with a genius, you have to figure out where the limitations of your own genius is. And like, there is 1,000% a part of Sean McVay that is like, I can win with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And there's, by the way, a 100% part of me that, or not a 100% part of me, there is a 25% part of me that from a pure experiment standpoint wanted to see if that was correct.
Oh, don't get me wrong. This was going to be a media circus if he had walked away and we would have had this kind of pressure on the team. But Craig, do you not understand my logic there? If you're going to argue that you can do it with other guys as the reason why you're letting this guy go, well, then what happened the first time? What happened? Oh, that's right. You had to get me. Do the math.
Well,
you know?
of course. And it's inarguable because, like, yeah, they won. And it's like, well, could they have potentially let Jared Goff improve and won with Jared Goff? The current version of Jared Goff? Maybe. Do you have a better chance with Stafford? Absolutely. And it's undeniable that they can do it with Stafford because they did. But also, is Matthew Stafford, like, one other thing that Jordan said that was really funny was, she thinks part of the reason they benched Stafford in week 18 to give him the week off was because they kind of knew it would piss him off. And they wanted like angry, super competitive Matthew. Yeah. Like, she's like, this is my own conspiracy. This is 100% me throwing this out. There's my opinion. But like, they knew if they wanted to get the absolute best version of Matthew Stafford, that him being a little bit angry for like a couple weeks and just going nuclear might be their best chance to win a Super Bowl. And
okay, but that's
awesome.
That's a different matter than how this looks to the rest of the franchise. Let's take a guy like Verse, who all of a sudden is probably going to be their best player coming up on that. You think he's not going to look at this and say, oh, they treated their best player like this when it's time for him to re-up? I don't care about the future plans if the logic behind the current one is faulty. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that this ultimately comes out as a great look for the Rams front office. I can't believe I'm yelling this loudly about the Los Angeles Rams in February.
So the Rams restructure the deal. He's going to stay there. It's also, by the way, an enormous because this affects the Giants were in on him. There was another team that was in on him. But like now the Darnold, like I think if Stafford winds up going, the Rams are probably seeing, can we get Darnold for 10, 15 million a year less than we would have paid Stafford on like a 2-year deal, that money that expires, or that we have flexibility in year 3 when all of a sudden your boy you just mentioned, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, they have to extend Colby Turner next year. Like these young defensive players that the Rams have, like those extensions will come sooner rather than later. So I'm sure this restructure still gives them flexibility to the point that you might be yelling about the Rams next February as well. But he'll be a year older and we'll see what, how he plays this year. And that's the thing, is like he played well enough to earn it again. It's not surprising to me they run it back, but there's huge ramifications for this in terms of what happens to everyone else. Darnold loses a potential landing space. Multiple other teams lose a potential quarterback option. And by the way, I also think this might have been the one place where I would have, if Aaron Rodgers plays there next year, I would have went, okay. I feel like maybe they can make it worse. And sir, you can count your blessings. You don't have to deal with Aaron Rodgers next year.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. That's what the bullet we were trying to dodge the entire time. If you're telling me Stafford and Kupp for Devontae and Rodgers, no. I would have said no every time. That's what was going to happen. Thank God.
You don't want, like, Rodgers would not run the organization the same way he did in New York, but I don't think he can play anymore. So that seems,
correct.
relevant.
Absolutely right.
Clinton Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show, of course, host of Clinton and Friends on ESPN Radio, emanates every morning from Los Angeles, also does the locals out there on 710 ESPN in LA, writing for ESPN.com and Anscape, where you did quite a bit of coverage of Colorado football over the past couple of years, Clinton, and going into NFL Combine weekend, where the actual players will be on the field. We are still waiting to hear what teams think of Travis Hunter and which side of the ball he should play on. Can he play both? We know he's going to probably go in the top 5 of this draft. Do you have strong feelings either way on like the best both situation for Travis, which is something that most of us don't actually talk about because we just assume the team will make the call, and what teams might be thinking about when they look at him?
Here's what I think about Travis, and this is going to sound a little odd. I have strong feelings about no team having strong feelings. And here's why. I think with the Colorado program, it was easy to look at the glitz, the glamour, the hype, for lack of a better term, and say, oh, that's all that it's about. They're not successful. But for people that didn't see the inner workings of that program, they don't understand how they run their operation in terms of how that scales up to being a professional if you have those skills. So think about it. You know how much work you have to do beyond physically to be able to understand offensive and defensive schemes? Like, you've got to be a very smart football player, never mind a very skilled one. And we're not even talking about special teams either. So there's three sides of the ball effectively. Here's what I would do if I was an NFL franchise, and as we just talked about, very rarely comes up because of the hubris. I would just test it and say, what can he figure out? You're not that good anyway. Whoever's going to take him, obviously, at the number one, see if he can do it. It is worth your time and investment if a player wants to learn both sides of the ball, whatever the position it turns out that he plays may be, to see how it goes. I think special teams has to be a part of what he does. That's a baseline given.
Talking about like kick returns, punt returns.
Yes. He will be playing two sides of the ball by default for me because special teams will be part of it, and I would stick to punts, not kickoffs. That's me. But if you end up finding a guy who really is that much of a football genius and really can, with the sort of a differing weight program, a kind of all year round situation, sustain the hits, why would you not let that happen? Why would you pigeonhole yourself just because? That makes no sense to me, although I think that's probably what some NFL team is going to do. Well, we see you there, so that's what we're going to choose. I wouldn't do that. You've got a chance to be a unicorn.
I wonder and like Dion would be able to talk about this, not only because he coached Travis and had to figure this out in college, but because he did it on some level in the pros. Like, the purely logistics of offensive and defensive team meetings are at the same time, and you're not going to stagger them so that, like, the offense is just waiting around twiddling their thumbs so Travis can figure out his defensive meetings, and then you can go. Like, you're not doing that. So, like, how do you actually teach him? Now, if he will probably be willing to put in the extra time, and if your coaching staff is, there are certainly ways around it on some level, but there is just the baseline level. He cannot be in two places at once. NFL schemes and playbooks are much thicker and deeper than college ones. And so it's not necessarily his mental capacity to handle it or not. It's how do you effectively teach him both? Because that's not a challenge you typically have to deal with. And where I've kind of sat on it is if you can make him a full-time corner with a limited offensive package. He's in there on third downs. We don't have to teach him the run game because he's not going to run block. Yeah. We can get him some jet sweep stuff, maybe on first and second down. But like generally
speed
speaking,
and space options,
yeah. So generally speaking, he has a much more condensed offensive playbook that we can work on him with, and we can also in the practice field make sure he's a part of. But to teach him a full NFL offensive playbook and a full defensive NFL playbook, it's just hard from a time standpoint. And to master the game plan specifics every week as well. Like, that's where I think it actually becomes more difficult, which sucks because you don't want to lose out of talent because you just don't have enough hours in a day. But, like, you don't have enough hours in the day at the NFL level because of how deep those books go.
That is a tremendous breakdown, and I agree with what I would do as far as implementation if given a choice. But I also feel like, I'm sorry, what else are y'all doing? You're NFL coaches. If this is not a challenge worth figuring out, well, then what's the point of picking him? That's kind of where I'm at with that, is that like, yo, you're just going to have to make the commitment. This is what we're doing. Hello, it's your job. And that's kind of what I feel like is if you can make these moves around a quarterback, which people do, they basically rearrange their entire situations to thankfully or hopefully, even though it's the worst coach position in the league, make sure that that guy can play. This player is worth it to me. Maybe you do rearrange the way you do things. Maybe there is something that you want to reevaluate in terms of how you implement your game plans, what you teach and how you teach it. I think he's that special. I really honestly do, Craig. So yes, I agree with you regarding what would make sense within the current formatics of how coaches do things. But this is where if I were an owner or a GM, I would challenge my coaching staff. I would say, if you can't do both, because that's how we're going to figure out the best way to do one, then we don't need to pick him. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise you're just not equipped.
Yeah, I think the other side of it too, he apparently wants to play corner. Dude, I would be like, Travis, you got to play receiver, bro. You see what receivers getting paid versus what corners are getting paid?
That's true, but
purely on a financial decision.
Yeah, but that also comes down to how many touchdowns he can score. You know what I'm saying? And he can score touchdowns pretty much every time he touches the ball. So I wouldn't be too worried about the money if I were him. Also, he's already rich. Like, what are we talking about?
That's true, but like, would you rather be the highest paid receiver or the highest paid corner?
I get what you're saying, but again, we're talking about a unicorn. It could be a situation where he breaks both of those records in terms of what we know. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if he's playing both, I would rather just be the highest paid Travis Hunter.
Exactly. Thank you. Precisely right.
Clinton Yates, you can catch him mornings on ESPN Radio. You can listen on the ESPN app. Watch it on the ESPN app as well. The show is called Clinton and Friends if you want to also search for the podcast. ESPN.com and Anscape. Television, he's everywhere. Plus, it's baseball season, so he's going to start popping up on your TV more in general as well.
You know what else it is?
What's that?
Women's college basketball season, UCLA, USC. I'll be there this weekend.
Oh, what day is that?
Saturday is the Saturday. Saturday is the Saturday. Yeah. Shouts to De La Soul. Gotta go.
And I do believe that transitions just nicely into our weekend preview, which is next. Clinton, you know who our weekend preview is brought to you by?
No.
Nobody.
Goodbye, Craiger. What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 9-8. Tell your mama I said what's up.